Okay, picture this. You're taking a nice, relaxing stroll along a North Carolina beach, you arrange a few seashells in the sand, snap a quick picture for Instagram, and then, months later, you find yourself staring down federal criminal charges. I know, it sounds like some bizarre legal hypothetical, right? But this is the absolute reality currently facing former FBI Director James Comey.
Welcome to The Explainer. I am so incredibly glad you're here today. We are going to take a completely fact-based, impartial deep dive into what is easily one of the most unusual legal controversies of the year. We're going to examine the context of this whole situation, focusing on the people involved, the actual legal issues at play, and ultimately, why the outcome of this case actually matters.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to look at the Seashell incident itself, decode the criminal charges, break down intent and true threats, explore selective versus vindictive prosecution, map out the political context, and then wrap up with why this case matters to all of us. Let's jump in.
All right, Section 1, the Seashell incident. Literally an Instagram post in the sand.
So about 11 months ago, James Comey posted a photo on Instagram. It was just seashells spelling out the numbers 8647, and he captioned it as a cool shell formation. Now, the 47 part, that's pretty widely understood as a reference to Donald Trump, the 47th president. But it's the number 86 that has kicked off this absolute federal firestorm. And this perfectly highlights the core conflict we're dealing with. On one side, you've got the prosecution's view, which President Trump has echoed, asserting that 86 is this well-known mob term meaning to kill or eliminate. So to them, the post is a violent threat. But on the flip side, the defense and various critics are pointing out, wait a minute, 86 is just a standard culinary term. You know, like when a restaurant is out of a menu item or it's just general slang for canceling something.
Now, when the Secret Service actually went and questioned Comey right after the post went live, he took it down immediately. He told them he had absolutely no idea those numbers were associated with violence, he opposed violence, and a threat was literally not what he intended to communicate. In fact, in a recent response to all this, he doubled down, just saying, "I'm still innocent, I'm still not afraid."
Moving on to Section 2, decoding the criminal charges. Let's look at the federal statutes.
We need to see exactly what federal laws the prosecution claims were broken, because we're not just talking about bad internet etiquette here, these are major federal charges. The indictment from Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche leans on two very specific statutes. First up is 18 U.S.C. 871. This makes it a crime to knowingly and willfully threaten to take the life of or inflict bodily harm on the president. And second, we have 18 U.S.C. 875, which makes it illegal to transmit those threats through interstate commerce. In this case, that means posting it on the internet.
But here is the absolute kicker. The burden of proof for this is astronomically high. Acting AG Todd Blanche and his team cannot just stand up in court and say, hey, this post was in really poor taste. No way. They have to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, to a unanimous jury that Comey actually intended to inflict bodily harm on the president or incite others to do so.
And then there's this really weird layer of intrigue tucked into the indictment, a general forfeiture provision. Legal analysts are scratching their heads wondering what exactly the government wants to seize if they win this thing. See, Comey was actually on a book tour at the time promoting his novel FDR Drive, which, ironically enough, is about a podcaster riling people up to commit violence. So, are they going to go after his book proceeds? Or, as former FBI Assistant Director Chris Swecker threw out there, could they actually be targeting the North Carolina beach house where he found the shells? It's a crazy thought.
All right, Section 3, intent and true threats. This is an evolving standard.
The legal mechanics underlying all this are genuinely fascinating because the Supreme Court literally just changed the definition of a true threat. Prior to 2023, courts used what's known as the aloneness standard. That basically asked, how would a reasonable recipient interpret this? Would they see it as a serious threat? But then, in 2023, the Supreme Court shifted gears in a case called Counterman v. Colorado. They moved the focus squarely back to the defendant's actual state of mind. And what's super interesting here is that legal experts looking at Comey's indictment are saying the language seems to rely heavily on that old, outdated pre-2023 standard, focusing on how people might view the seashells rather than what Comey was actually thinking.
To put that into perspective, under the current counterman standard, the government has to prove Comey was operating with at least a level of recklessness or a deliberate disregard of a known risk that his seashells would be perceived as a serious unlawful threat. Try to imagine getting 12 different jurors to entirely agree on what was going through a guy's head while he was playing with shells on a beach. That is an incredibly steep hill for the prosecution to climb.
Which brings us to Section 4, selective versus vindictive prosecution. Basically, the defense playbook.
If this whole thing actually goes to trial, we really need to understand how the defense might fight back. Let's demystify some of this legal jargon. Vindictive prosecution is when you're charged purely in retaliation for exercising a legal right. Like say you appeal a conviction and bam, you get hit with worse charges. Selective prosecution, though, is when you get charged for something that a bunch of other similarly situated people also did, but those other folks were totally left alone. Experts are saying vindictive prosecution might be a tough sell here, but selective prosecution, that could be a huge asset for Comey's defense.
And you can clearly see why when you look at this. During the 2020 election, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer wore a pin that literally said 8645. Pro-Trump influencer Jack Posobiec used the exact term 86 when talking about Joe Biden. Did either of them face federal indictments? No. And the defense can even point to Donald Trump himself, who posted an image of President Biden bound and gagged in the back of a truck, which obviously didn't result in charges either. So the defense's main argument is going to be pretty straightforward. If 86ing a political opponent is a federal crime, why on earth is James Comey the only person being prosecuted for it?
Let's zoom out a bit for Section 5, the political context, pressure, and appointees. You really can't grasp the full weight of this explainer without looking at the broader political backdrop. Let's trace how this all unfolded. On Truth Social, Donald Trump publicly pressured then-Attorney General Pam Bondi. He wrote that people like Comey were guilty as hell and demanded action. Right after that, Lindsay Halligan gets appointed and brings an initial indictment against Comey for allegedly lying to Congress. But, plot twist, a judge actually threw that case out because Halligan was improperly appointed. Fast forward to today, and acting AG Todd Blanche has brought this second, entirely new indictment, this time about the Seashells.
And the number 11 is incredibly critical here. 11 months. That's how much time passed between Comey posting the Seashell picture and the indictment being unsealed. Now, prosecutors are saying, hey, this just shows it was a methodical investigation by career agents. But critics are quick to fire back, arguing that if this was genuinely an urgent, imminent threat to the president's life, waiting almost an entire year to press charges makes absolutely zero sense.
It's also super important to note that the pushback on this isn't just coming from one side of the aisle. Republican Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina publicly criticized it. He mentioned his own background in the restaurant industry, pointing out that 86 is just a cooking term. He called the whole case a disappointment, and even said that on its face, it looks like a vindictive prosecution, adding, "Republicans are better than that."
Finally, Section 6, why this case matters, the future of the Department of Justice.
So, stepping back from the Seashells for a second, what is the big takeaway here? Well, first off, Comey's legal battles might be far from over. There's reporting right now that prosecutors are considering a potential third indictment, possibly out of the Southern District of New York. This rumored case would be about Comey allegedly leaking confidential documents to a former colleague and informal lawyer, Danny Richmond. So it definitely looks like a sustained legal pressure campaign that is way bigger than a single social media post.
But the broader stakes here, they impact every single one of us. This case fundamentally tests the independence of the Department of Justice. Can it operate completely free from political pressure? It's also setting a massive precedent for the internet age. What is the actual legal threshold for a true threat online versus just political hyperbole or weird slang? And ultimately, it challenges the very boundaries of our First Amendment political speech, which has historically been fiercely protected, especially when we're talking about the president.
And that leaves us with this final, incredibly critical question. If a highly subjective interpretation of a slang term literally spelled out in seashells on a beach can result in a federal criminal indictment, where exactly do we draw the line? What does this mean for the future of the First Amendment and our right to criticize political leaders? It is a very delicate balance between national security and free speech, and we're definitely going to be watching this one closely. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.